Hello, everybody. I'm back. It's Thursday nights with Minutes with Milo, and I know we're going to talk about some more DNA stuff. Why? Well, I can tell you why this time. So tonight's show is courtesy of Joe Rogan's Experience, or the show, the podcast, Joe Rogan Experience. That's it. And I was listening to it, and he had a guest on, and guest was the I won't say CEO. Let's see if it's the CEO. Anyway, it was the founder, I'm pretty sure, of Colossal Biosciences. And through listening to this, of course, I'm interested in all kinds of stuff. I have mixed feelings about it. I think it's cool, but in a way, hey, yeah. Did you watch my video about my nice haircut? It was when did I do this? Last weekend? It's that time of year, every year for the past. I was looking back at the videos on the channel. I think this is the third year I shaved it. So I was going to go down to the skin again. The first time I went down and took the razor to it, it's such a pain in the butt. Such a pain in the butt that I decided not. Yeah, the Floby's still a flop. I've been to, I won't call them barbers. I've been to a barber shop where there was a stylist had a chair there. And I think barbershops have them too, but they have a vacuum on the clippers to suck up the hair so it doesn't get everywhere. But if they would just come up with something like that would, Floby, to me, it's a good concept. And the reason I wanted to give it a second chance is because I wanted it to work. I think it's really, a good idea, but nah, it's a flop. It's a flop. So let's see. From I want to ask Grok, who was on, who from Colossal Bioscience last on JRE podcast. So if you noticed the thumbnail for tonight's show, what? Sometimes it gives me this. Grok was unable to finish replying, and I don't know why. It happens a lot up here. Oh, man. Grok needs to verify that I am a human. What was I saying? Oh, the picture. How can I help you? Come on, man. Did you save any of my last searches? I'm getting distracted by this thing. Anyway, the picture that I used for tonight's show's thumbnail was actually drawn by Grok. So, back to Colossal Bioscience. The CEO was on the JRE, Joe Rogan's Experience, and they were talking about his company, how it got started, all that kind of stuff. So found out that they have actually made, and when I say made, to me it's made. Like I said, I have mixed feelings about this. Ben Lam, Lamm. All right, so let's see who is Bill Lamm. They de-extinctioned is the term that they used. A dire wolf, and that's what that picture is on the thumbnail. And we'll find out what a dire wolf is and why it might be a little more special now than when it was living. And when I say de-extinctioned, so they made this, they genetically engineered these embryos, pups, whatever, and now they have 3 genetically engineered wolves to be dire wolves. And how did they do this? The podcast is really cool. Okay, based on your previous interest in dire wolves and de-extinction, you might be referring to Bill Lam, a name that appeared in some contexts related to scientific controversial efforts. However, after reviewing the information, there's no direct connection between Bill Lam or Bill Lane and the dire wolf project by Colossal Biosciences. Okay, how come it showed over here? Let me share this with you so I want you can understand what I'm trying to get to here. All right. So take me, shrink me down here, and we're going to share that. All right. So I looked up who it was going to be on Joe Rogan's Experience. I clicked on his YouTube channel, and where did it go? Dave Smith here. Ben Lam. Did I say Bill? Who did I say? Now this is, yeah, I said Bill. Edit that. I'm sorry. Ben. So let's look that up. So if you listen to podcasts, I recommend the Joe Rogan Experience because he's got really wild things on it like this. All right, so Bill Lam is an American serial entrepreneur, billionaire, and a co-founder and CEO of Colossal Biosciences. All right, a biotechnological company focused on de-extinction and conservation. He partnered with Harvard Genesis geneticist George Church in 2021 to launch Colossal, which aims to revive extinct species like the woolly mammoth, Tasmanian tiger, and the dodo, while also working on preserving endangered species. All right, so these are the pictures that I asked it to draw. So they made another. So I know I'm kind of skipping around on this thing. So started listening to the podcast, and they were just talking about how he got started, how this Bill Lam guy got started in doing this. And he was a coder. He's a computer science guy. And he thought it was interesting what this guy was doing, geneticist, and started talking to him. And they immediately hit it off and started this business, Colossal Biosciences. But the guy he hooked up with initially was doing lots and lots of research on woolly mammoths. So they're going to try to bring the woolly mammoth back, and they started with smaller creatures. And when I say started with smaller creatures, they've done, we'll look at this, in a nutshell, they've given mice woolly mammoth hair. I kid you not. This is what one thing Rogan was saying. He goes, this podcast is going to blow your mind. It's going to be something that you never thought would happen. And I don't know, these pups, we'll talk about, they're very young. But the woolly mouse, let's see. We're going to ask, I'll see if it can show me pictures of the woolly mouse. This is actually genetic. Oh, come on. All right. We're going to have to go to the real internet, I guess. See, the woolly mouse refers to a variety of genetically modified laboratory mice developed in 2025 by Colossal Biosciences as a part of efforts towards the de-extinction of the woolly mammoth. The mice feature mammoth-inspired traits which include woolly coats and other genetic modifications at making them cold weathers. So, this is the woolly mouse. This is a regular mouse. This is a woolly mouse. So when I say they actually have woolly mammoth hair, they didn't just take, if you notice, they just didn't take and grow a regular mouse hair, the long-necked leopard horse. Maybe aliens would come down and manipulated lots of genes and made the long-necked leopard horse. You never know. But they just didn't take a mouse and make its hair longer. They made it genetically like woolly mammoth hair. I can't explain how. And they made it, as you can see, a different color. Now, this wasn't by random chance. They believe that woolly mammoths are really more of a blonde than brown. If you see woolly mammoths everywhere they're depicted, and most of the time, like here, they're darker. All right? So, but they believe a woolly mammoth hair is going to be more blonde. So that's the reason they made them more blonde. So the guy that Ben Lamb hooked up with was really into woolly mammoths, and that's, I think, where they're going. So I'm going to go to that. But like I said, they started out with mice. And then they started looking at lots of things. They look at lots of things, but one of the things they're doing, this Colossal Bioscience, is they're not selling these things. They're not selling the mice. They're not selling the dire wolves. They're not going to sell woolly mammoths. I guess theoretically, what they say, what the guy was saying on Rogan, is they're giving away this stuff for free. They're not giving away mice or giving away any of these things. They're giving away the technology that they're developing for free. And they're going to use it to help, like if there's an endangered species, like there's a North American red wolf that is, there's only like supposedly the only there's 15 of them left, and there's some in North Carolina. There's red wolf. The American red wolf's legend. Let's get over here. Okay, the only large carnivore exclusively native to the United States. The American red wolf historically roamed an expanse range from Texas to New York. Less than 20 of these wolves exist in the wild today. So what they're planning on trying to do is create these wolves genetically, and they put them out like cookie cutters. They can make, I'm going to use this word loosely, they can make hundreds of them to take and get the red wolf off the endangered species list to help repopulate these red wolves back into their, native areas, and that's what the conversation is. So they are doing, this Colossal Biosciences place is doing a lot in different areas with DNA. They're collecting samples of DNA from to make a DNA bank of mammals. I think they're starting with, I won't say, how did they word that? Large mammal species of North America, something like that. So, that might include, elk and deer and antelope and all those things, all the way down to eventually they're going to make, a huge DNA library. And they're doing this not by taking bone samples or by flesh samples. They're doing it out of blood cells. They have come up with a way to get DNA, viable, usable, clonable DNA from blood samples. So how did they come up with this dire wolf? There's none living. So what they've done is it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle with pieces missing. So they've gotten, the way that I understood it, they had like a 3/4 of an inch of a piece of tooth. How do they know it's from a dire wolf? I cannot tell you. But in the tooth, they were able to extract some DNA. And it wasn't a full chain, it was just a partial chain. So then they, through their business, they deal with a lot of museums. Different things where I have different old bones, old animals, things like that. And they came across was it a skull? Anyway, they came across some more viable direwolf DNA. And so that gave them 2 pieces. And then through that, they're able to figure out which wolf is the closest to a dire wolf. So they did that, and then were able to fill in the pieces. And so it's not really a clone of a dire wolf because they don't have the full DNA sequences, but it's not really, I think, in the other, what we saw here, what Grok was telling me, it's not, I think it was close to a gray wolf. And so they've made these genetically from dire wolf DNA and mixing and matching it and throwing it in and mixing it all together and shaking it up with the gray wolf, I think. And now they have 3 pups. They have 3 pups. So they talked about the Jurassic Park, Garthok. They're not going to do dinosaurs. They're doing mammals and things that are, I guess, call it recent. And you know, it's as far as the world turns, you know, how old it is and things like that. These are more recent. So, one of the reasons they did a dire wolf is because supposedly, and I haven't watched the Lord of the Rings trilogies and stuff like that, or TV shows, whatever it was, but apparently a dire wolf plays a large or an important role or a symbolic role in those movies. And so, you know, it's kind of a nerdy twist on, you know, a new process where they, you know, well, dire wolf was a real thing. They've been extinct for a while. They were able to get it together, and, you know, they started out with mice, started out with mammals. They're stepping up to larger things. And so, you know, but what blows my mind, is they do it from blood cells. Now, one of the things I talked about before on one of the other shows was another podcast I'd listened to, and that dealt with stem cell technology or science, which this also has that kind of potential to it, because in this whole process of just taking blood cells and getting viable DNA, they used, I think, some of those same technologies that they were using in stem cell technology to then make these, you know, viable DNAs, and, you know, then therefore they can grow these. And I don't know the specifics, but I think they're, you know, they're not growing them in test tubes. The mice they talked about doing with the gestation period of the female mouse is like 20 some days. So let's see. Let's get back up here. So in 2025, this is the dire wolf de-extinction process. Colossal announced the birth of 3 dire wolves. The first claimed de-extinction by editing 14 genes in the gray wolf cell to express 20 dire wolf traits named Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi. something like that. There's one female. These wolves were born to surrogate hound mixes. So apparently, hound, I'm guessing dog, I don't know why. However, the IUCN Species Survival Commission canid specialist group and independent experts dispute the claim, stating they are not true dire wolves and may not contribute to conservation. So apparently they've run into a lot of scientists that are saying these aren't real species, that there's a hodgepodge, they're not really this, they're not really that. I can't tell you. I have no idea. But let's see what they look like. And you know what kind of blows my mind is they're not arguing really about or throwing the arms up in air about they made these things. They're up in arms about, well, you made wolves that weren't really dire wolves. Well, hello. To me,
dire wolves walking the earth for the first time since the Stone Age.
Pups of a long extinct species are seeing the light of day. ABC's Andrew Dimbert is telling us how scientists are claiming to have brought dire wolves back to life.
It's a howl 13,000 years in the making. Dire wolves walking the earth for the first time since the Stone Age, thanks to a remarkable scientific breakthrough.
The dire wolf is the first de-extinct species.
Until recently, the only way to catch a glimpse of the bygone beast was to watch Game of Thrones.
The dire wolf is a sigil of your house. They were meant to have them.
But now, Texas-based Colossal Biosciences has recreated the canines by implanting fossilized genes into the gray wolf.
We've taken a gray wolf genome, a gray wolf cell, which is already genetically 99.5% identical to dire wolves, and we've edited those cells at multiple places in its DNA sequence to contain the dire wolf version of the DNA.
Colossal giving ABC News an exclusive glimpse inside their lab.
That animal looks like a dire wolf, it will behave like a dire wolf, and it is a dire wolf.
But as dire pups Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi grow, so does the controversy surrounding their existence.
Ecosystems are very delicately balanced, and nature is far more complicated than our ability as humans to understand it or to understand all the possible unforeseen consequences.
Some critics claim these new wolves aren't actually dire wolves, since they share so much of their DNA with their modern-day counterparts, while others are concerned that de-extinction efforts could have unforeseen or even deadly consequences.
The bottom line is a lot of the genome we still do not understand, and so one wants to be careful if you're mucking around with genes that there may be things we don't understand. You may produce a wolf that's twice as ferocious.
Andrew Dimbert, ABC News, New York.
So that's I guess part of my point is they've argued about whether it's a dire wolf, it's not a dire wolf, it's this, it's that, and dude, we can get over that, but the fact that they've done it, they don't even argue the fact that they've done something like that, even if it's just taking a gray wolf and turning the stupid thing white with pink eyes and being able to do that. In my mind, it doesn't really matter. Is it a true dire wolf? Who's to say? You know what I mean? Who's to say, because they don't have the full DNA sequence for a true dire wolf, because there's none living. Is it close enough to say it's a dire wolf? Well, some people are going to say yes. My point of view is, guess what, man? It is human made. It's human genetics genetically engineered to look like something based on something that is not put together by nature. So to me, and maybe I'm behind the times, which I probably am behind the times. To me, that's the big story. The big story is these people are doing it with, I don't know how to express it. They're doing it, I'm going to say relatively easy, just because they're just doing it from blood cells. Now, was it hard to figure out? I bet it was. But now that they've figured it out, they're turning that loose. So if you have that capability or that desire to have that capability, then with enough money and smarts, you could do what they're doing. Somebody out there could do what they're doing, which to me is, you're just messing with Mother Nature. Yeah, they may have let the genie out of the bottle and doomed humanity and messing around and find out. Well, that's the reason I've, titled the show like I did. It's just, like I said, probably behind the times. This has probably been going on a lot more, because I'm sure these people at Colossal Biosciences aren't really inventing or reinventing the wheel. I'm sure they're, building their stuff off things that have already happened. And I know they've cloned sheep and different animals, and that cloning a human and all that stuff's a big thing. But this is kind of almost in my mind, beyond that, because they've taken that. Oh well, I have a pencil, I clone it, then I have a pencil exactly like this pencil. I already have this pencil. They're taking something that's thousands and thousands and thousands of years dead, gone. Nobody's ever seen one. Putting it together with something that, resembles its close relative, and then spitting it out on the other end. It's like taking, ink and putting it with this, and then it comes out to be a feather quill through genetically, modifying that and making it a feather quill. You're taking something, and yes, it's another writing utensil, but it's totally different than, relatively speaking, different than the pencil. So, I mean, and these colossal people are talking about doing things. All right, so the Woolly Mammoth Project, Colossal aims to create a woolly mammoth elephant hybrid by 2028, editing Asian elephant genomes to express mammoth traits like cold resistance. There achieved over 20 targeted gene edits, sequenced the Asian elephant genome, the first since the Human Genome Project, and generated a de novo mammoth genome. The goal is to reintroduce these hybrids to the Arctic tundra to restore ecosystems. So, yes, they basically genetically engineered another gray wolf. Well, yes, in a way, they didn't have the whole, the whole gene sequence. And so it's the same thing they're going to do with the woolly mammoth. Through genetics, they're able to determine that the Asian elephant is the closest to a woolly mammoth genetically. So when they have pieces and parts missing, then they can take, Asian elephant genes and stick in there, because they're close enough relatives that it's going to be, it's going to have traits of a woolly mammoth and traits that are common with an Asian elephant. Just like they have the dire wolf traits, and then they also have the traits that are common with the gray wolf. And so, yeah, they're filling in the gaps. And it's not, yeah, it can't be a dire wolf exactly because it's not a true clone of a dire wolf. Now, are we splitting hairs about what a clone is? So let's just say they had found a dire wolf that had 100% usable DNA, and then they took that DNA and replicated it, and they're using synthetic DNA, as they call it, to do some of this filling in different places, and then they create a dire wolf that has the exact 100% same DNA as the body they found, then that would be a clone maybe. And then maybe somebody would say, well, yes, since you had 100% of the dire wolf DNA and you used that to make another dire DNA or another dire wolf, then maybe they would be, be able to say, okay, we agree, that's a dire wolf. But nobody's going to say that. I'm sure there's always going to be. This guy was talking about, the species is something that is not uniformed across the scientific community. So you can't. Some people say, or some scientists say, tooth patterns play an enormous part in determining species of animals. And of course, some of them say, well, it's not that. It's geographical location indicates a species. They just can't agree upon what makes a species, if you're part of this one or you're part of that one. And that's a big argument they have about, whether or not, one can mate with the other. Does that mean they're the same species or the opposite species? So when he was talking about, the scientists are saying it's not a true dire wolf, it's not a true this, it's not the species genome, whatever. He says a lot of it is just splitting hairs, and nobody's wanting to come out and say, wow, you've done a good job, let's do this. But apparently they have contacted some people in the federal government, and they're going to start reintroducing these red wolves populations in areas like North Carolina, and there was another one that where was it? I wish I could remember where the red wolf was. There's another area that they've studied these wolf packs and gotten samples from them, and they are, and I don't know how they know, a different, group of red wolves that's not in North Carolina. Well, all right. So you're talking about the ecosystem for the dire wolves, or you're talking about the ecosystem for one of the things they're saying about for the woolly mammoth is that if they reintroduce the woolly mammoth into Antarctica or into the Arctic or into the cold things, that it will be better for that ecosystem. Now, so the dire wolves, I don't think they have right now a plan to release or make hundreds of dire wolves and then turn them out into the wild. So right now they've got the 3 pups. They're raising them. They're seeing how they do. I don't know if they're going to turn them loose in an ecosystem or not. They did talk about not. They've talked about where wolves populations have been brought back into, like Montana and these places where for a long time, everybody had killed off the wolves, and so like the uh, big animals like the elk and the deer were just overpopulated, and they were really uh, hurting the environment because there was no way to keep their population in check. So they've reintroduced wolves into these areas through these conservation projects, and have really brought back a balance between the wolves and the prey, and therefore the ecosystem's coming back into balance. So maybe it was Yellowstone. So they're not. I don't think they have a plan to really just dump out a bunch, but they do have a plan working with the government to start building up this red wolf population, so it is no longer going to be on the endangered species list. So how does that work out? I don't know. I have no idea. But let's get back up to this one. So they're talking about woolly mammoths. The goal is to reintroduce the hybrids to the Arctic tundra to restore the ecosystem. Let's see what Wikipedia, what website is that? Business Wire, Colossal.com. Let's open that. Open link in a new tab. So this is their website, the Colossal Laboratories and Bioscience. So like I said, they're wanting to do lots of things, and the reason that I'm bouncing around a lot is because the podcast bounced around a lot. The de-extinction, bringing things back that are extinct, making things that are on the endangered species list to help bring about their population up above the potential for extinction, bringing those things back up so there'll be a population again, and then creating a DNA library of the large mammals, I forget what they call them, land mammals, whatever it might be, of all the species, so that there's always a backup. If something happens to, just use the red wolves again as an example, they wake up one morning, 100% of them are dead. Well, then they'll have this backup DNA source that then they could bring back the red wolves. So they're working on doing that. One of the things they're looking at is, how humans think they're going to do, and this is you could say this argument about this Colossal Bioscience place. All right, so in Australia, they imported house cats to help control the population of rabbits or mice or something that was another invasive species to Australia. So they brought the cats in, and now the cats are killing everything in sight, and they've just overrun. So now they're talking about bringing back from extinction the Tasmanian devil, or the Tasmanian tiger, or whatever it is. Let's see, what do they call that one? The Tasmanian tiger. Launched in 2022, the University of Melbourne, Colossal is working to de-extinct the thylacine extinct since 1936. They've produced the highest quality ancient genome for an extinct species with only 45 gaps and made over 300 genetic edits in a flat-tailed Donat cell line, the most edited animal cell to date. The process aims to reintroduce these animals to Tasmania to balance ecosystems and develop marsupial reproductive technologies. So they're talking about doing that to help rid Australia of all these house cats because there's no real predator for them. They put bounties on them, they kill them off where they can. But see, they're killing all the small ground animals, it's all the small birds, and they're wreaking havoc on it. So but see, that's just the thing. I brought that in to kill that. Now I got to bring this in to kill the first thing, and now I've got to bring in a third, fourth thing to kill the third thing. See, we think we're doing the best thing there is, just like this Colossal, and this is one of the arguments that these scientists are making about this technology and about doing this is, well, you think you're doing it in, doing nature a good thing, but only history will tell that if you're doing a good thing for nature or not. By that time, you may introduce the dire wolf and, it becomes the major predator and, kills out everything else. That's one of the things, they talk about. And, one of the things they talked about what was it? It was a toad. So what was, yeah. Well, all the big kudzu that grows along the interstate, you see it everywhere. It's just a very invasive plant. That's an invasive plant that was brought in for ground cover. I mean, they brought it in to do that, but it just took off like wildfire. There's no controlling it now. And, that's, they, well, let's do this and that helps that, and let's do that and it'll help this. It's, what was I thinking of? Oh, the toad. What kind of toad was it that has a neurotoxin? They brought a toad in to kill some insects, and then some predators started trying to eat the toads. Well, the toads have neurotoxin in their blood to protect them, and it was killing off all these marsupials. I think it's another one of these silly things in Australia. And so now they're looking at how they can edit the DNA of these marsupials to where they are immune to this toad's bio-neurotoxin that's in their glands, so that if they get, if they do eat one of these toads, cane toads, thank you very much, you are correct, cane toads. So cane toads are a problem, and it might be in Australia again because they talk about marsupials. So they have discovered that they can edit he called it one number of the genetic code, which gives that animal then like 15,000 times the immunity to the cane toad neurotoxin. And they're going to probably end up doing something like that to help save the population, because you can't teach these animals not to bite or to try to eat the cane toad. So, it's just killing them off. And I guess, natural selection's too slow. So, because what's going to eventually, what might happen, what nature would see happen would be something bites the cane toad, it gets really sick, but it doesn't kill it. So then what happens is it passes that gene to its offspring. So then, 3 out of the 50 offspring it has can bite a cane toad and not die. Then those pass it on, and then over thousands and thousands of years, it develops, most all that animal has an immunity to cane toads. And what they're doing is they're supposedly thinking about just skipping that thousands of years of evolution, natural selection, and just popping in the gene edit. So then, the next thing you know, it's in a few years that has taken place, and now there's an immunity to the cane toad neurotoxin in these animals. Is it good or bad? Like I said, only history would tell. But Colossal Laboratories and Biosciences, maybe they're not the first to do this. First one I've learned about. It just kind of blows my mind that people aren't up in arms about it's not regulated. They didn't talk about any kind of federal government regulation. They didn't talk about any kind of permits they needed. They're going out here, and just making new animals. And nobody's tried to stop them that I know of. Which kind of blows my mind. Let's see. Where was that? Let me look down here to this guy's bio again. So they aim to revive extinct species like the woolly mammoth, the Tasmanian tiger, and the dodo, while also working on preserving endangered species. Lamb, I'm going to call him Lamb, led the company's efforts to create the woolly mouse and the controversial de-extinction of the dire wolf in 2025, producing 3 pups. Using CRISPR and genetic engineering techniques on gray wolf cells, his net worth is estimated at $3.7 billion as of 2025, largely tied to Colossal's $10.2 billion valuation after raising $435 million, including a $200 million round led by TWG Global. Before Colossal, Lamb founded and sold 5 companies: Simply Interactive, Chaotic Moon Studios, Team Chaos, Conservable, and Hypergiant. He also co-founded FormBio in 2022, a software company spun out of Colossal to aid scientific discovery, and breaking in 2024, a synthetic biology startup that developed a microbe X32 to degrade plastics in 22 months. Cool. In October 24, he launched the Colossal Foundation, a nonprofit using Colossal's tech for global conservation and a focus on biobanking. He's 43. He started his entrepreneurial journey as a senior at Baylor University, where he studied finance and accounting. He's a fellow of the Explorers Club, serves the Planetary Society's Scientific Advisory Board, and is on the advisory board of the ARC mission. He's known for his intense work ethic, with some peers expressing concern over his work-life balance, and has been praised for attracting top talent and executing ambitious timelines. Lamb has appeared on platforms like Joe Rogan's podcast, April 2025, to discuss his work, including the Dire Wolf Project, which drew emotional reactions from figures like George R.R. Martin. However, his de-extinction efforts have sparked debate, with critics questioning the ecological impact and conservation value of these revived species. Some posts on X have also labeled him a tech pro and raised concerns about his business practices, though these sentiments are inconclusive. So he's a busy little boy. So critics, including the IUCN, I don't know what that stands for, argue that creating phenotypic proxies, hybrids, may not aid conservation and could harm extant species like gray wolves due to ecological mismatches. Some projects like the dire wolf rely on preprints lacking peer review, raising concerns about scientific rigor. So, see, Colossal spun out from Bio in 2022. A computational life sciences platform to support de-extinction in broader biotech applications. They've advanced multiplex genome editing, stem cell reprogramming, and embryo manipulation techniques, contributing to conservation and human healthcare. So this multiplex genome editing, he talked about that, and that's the deal where, you know, they can genetically do these things hundreds at a time. Instead of somebody sitting down and doing one gene, doing one, you know, DNA sequence or whatever, they can do these things multiples at a time. So theoretically, like I talked before, they could do hundreds of the red wolves in however many, you know, months it would take to birth, you know, to birth them. If they could find enough surrogates to do it, compatible surrogates, I'm assuming, then they could have as many of those as they had in process. I don't know how to explain it, but the way he's basically explained it is, instead of being able to just do one DNA sequence at a time and making one viable animal at a time, they can potentially do them in multiples. So given certain constraints, you know, they might be able to do 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 at a time and, you know, really ramp up, you know, the population. So Colossal was researching potential de-extinction for species like the Irish elk, great auk, blue buck, ground sloths, moas, saber-toothed cats, longhorned bison, Columbian mammoth, cave hyena, mastodons, American cheetahs, woolly rhinoceroses, some other things I can't pronounce, and Steller's sea cow, depending on pending artificial womb development. What is sticking down there, man? I get something down there. That's another thing they talked about, was this, where'd it go? What was that last thing I said? Steller's sea cow. All right. So this thing is like he described it as like a manatee the size of a whale. And they were discovered in the 1800s, and they hunted them out of extinction in like 3 years or something. Let's see what Grok has to say about the Steller sea cow. Was a massive marine mammal in the Silurian family related to manatees and dugongs, but much larger, growing up to 30 feet long and weighing around 8 to 10 tons. It had a thick, bark-like skin, a small head with a downturned mouth for grazing on kelp, and a whale-like fluke instead of hind limbs. The forelimbs were paddle-like, adapted for swimming in cold waters. Named after German naturalist Georg Wilhelm Steller, who documented it in 1741 during the Bering expedition. It lived in the North Pacific, primarily around Commander Islands near the Bering Sea. Stellar sea cows were slow, docile, and lacking natural predators until humans arrived. They were hunted to extinction by 1768, just 27 years after the discovery, due to their abundant blubber and meat, which supported Russian fur traders. Their extinction is one of the fastest human-driven losses of a large mammal. They thrived in shallow, kelp-rich waters, often floating at the surface, and were social, living in small family groups. The Colossal Biosciences is researching the potential de-extinction as mentioned in their list of target species, but this would require artificial womb technology due to their size and aquatic nature. Fossils and Stellar's detailed accounts provide most of what we know, since no complete skeletons remain. Only bones and fragments in museums like the Smithsonian. Posts on X highlight ongoing fascination with their size and tragic loss. So, it seems like they could almost do any animal that they wanted to. I mean, if you can do wolves, you can do mice. I just don't. I mean, they've turned the corner on a lot of that. From where I'm sitting, I'm not sure it's really the best. I mean, would I like to see a saber-toothed tiger? Yeah, I mean, I think that would be cool. But do I want the American leopard or cheetah roaming the plains again? I don't know. I just don't know if that would be a good thing or not. So I hope, somewhere, I mean, the government regulates everything. Does this need regulation? I would have thought there would have been more hoops to jump through, other than just to be turned loose with whatever, scientific equipment that you need and smarts that you need to go out here and, I hate to sound stupid, but to make new animals or to bring back animals. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Leave me a comment. Put something on the, the YouTube there. Send me an email. Let me know what you think about the whole shooting match. I know I didn't look to see when he had done it. It was recent. It was very recent that they did this podcast. 2 weeks ago. So they did this podcast 2 weeks ago. And, so this stuff is, just now coming into my radar. During the summertime, I listen to a lot more podcasts because I'm doing a lot more stuff outside. And, I put a set of earbuds in, and, listen to music or podcasts or, those kind of things to help pass the time. But, like I said, I appreciate everybody tuning in. It's been over an hour. Garthog, I appreciate you coming by. And do a little research. Tell me what you think. I'll be on next Thursday, hopefully, 9 o'clock. We can talk about it some more. If somebody wants to call in or send me messages or something, talk about it a little more or do a little more research. I don't know. I just have mixed feelings about it. If you haven't already, like, subscribe to the channel, get the notification bell turned on, share it with your family, your friends, you know, your fellow aliens, whoever you might have at the house, you know, get them to watch. Tell me if you like it, you don't like it. I don't know. Maybe you will. Maybe you like it. If you decide you want to send in a comment, give me some ideas of what you want to hear about. We can do it. I find most of all this stuff kind of interesting. Next, we can talk about the Heisenberg uncertainty principle and particle accelerators. Can I build one of those at home? I did show something that was on YouTube that I've seen before. Thought that was very interesting. Now, of course, they've bumped up the process on it. I'm trying to remember what they call it. Can't remember what they call it now. But it is a, I'm going to use the word weapon that doesn't use gunpowder. It uses electronic waves or magnetic waves to push out the projectile. And I can't remember what they call it. And literally, when I was, killing a little time before the show started, I saw it on YouTube where these people were shooting little metal projectiles out of this gun. It was just a hum, and these things were just spitting out the end of it. It's like a magnetic wave pulse weapon, something, whatever. Pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. And that's when you said particle accelerators, that's what made me think of it. It's because of, particle accelerators are like magic to me. I don't have any idea. And then how you can create some kind of magnetic wave that pushes the projectile out the end of a barrel like this thing was doing, blows my mind too. So I could have done it on hydrogen pills that you put in your water and it's supposed to make you feel good. Hydrogen bath bombs, I looked at those. It's all kinds of crazy things to talk about. Let me know what you might want to talk about. My telephone number's down there. Give me a call. We can talk about it. All right. Appreciate everybody coming by. Appreciate you watching. Leave me a comment. And call it a night for this show. All right.